Unmute myself and do that again. G'day everyone and welcome to another edition of the Weekend Wrap brought to you by CrowCast, of course, our second edition of the pre-season. And it wouldn't be a CrowCast Weekend Wrap without the inimitable, the incomparable Macca.
After all those adjectives, please, I wonder what was going to come next. But happy to be here, mate.
Very good. It's been an interesting week again, obviously with the trial on Friday night, giving us a bit of insight into where we're at. I don't know whether you went down or whether you watched it on the telly, but it was quite interesting.
Well, I watched it 3 times and I've gone through it, and I don't know what it really told us, and because it was, like a mismatch in the first place with the Blues versus the Yellows, and then they did after halftime mixed it a little bit. But I suppose it did tell us what players are in good form, what players are in reasonable form, and it also probably showed a couple up that you can say won't play for a while.
Yeah, very true. I mean, first hit out, it's always difficult to really understand exactly what it means, if anything. There were some good players. Rankin in a Crows Guernsey was a standout, obviously, and he's certainly looking like he's enjoying the new environment at West Lakes. I thought
we enjoyed every moment of it, Pete, and he looked like he was too.
100%, yeah, absolutely. A bit of a taste of what's to come, and we didn't really see him too much through the midfield. He spent most of his time up forward, but nonetheless, he showed just how dangerous he could be in those circumstances, and it just leaves you salivating a little bit, doesn't it?
Look, I think that I was really very critical. Perhaps we might have paid too much for Rankin, but I think what we paid for him becomes irrelevant now. What we do know, we've got a damn good player on our hands, and it doesn't matter whether he's in the centre or whether he's around goals. His ability just to read where the ball's going is unbelievable. I mean, his reactions are so much quicker than everybody else's.
He's very
true. He's going to be a star.
He's got definite goal sense. He's got definite game sense, and he looks to be very switched on. A couple of others I thought looked pretty good. Harry Schoenberg has stripped very fit, which matches up with the pre-season info that we got a few weeks ago. He looks to be hitting the ground running. He was still a bit scratchy in terms of his disposal, but a good start from Harry. I thought he looked quite good.
Few kilos less, so he's obviously done the work properly. Whether we can ever get his kicking up to right up to par, I don't know. That's where he let himself down a few times. But in terms of being a true midfielder, he's starting to look like a true midfielder. His ability at centre bounce was very good as well, and work around the ground was good, and he looks a lot fitter. But if we could just get that disposal to be 100% spot on, he'd be really damaging.
Yeah, now Tracy's just saying that she has had a bit of trouble with Discord. All my meters seem to be right, Tracy, in terms of sound going into Discord. I don't know whether anyone else is having any problems with Discord, but I think it's okay. So I don't know whether you need to perhaps just restart. And speaking of Discord, of course, welcome to everyone who's joined us both on the live stage and also in the live show chat. As always, Macca, we're live and interactive. So at any stage, I'm sure people have got some views in terms of what they think from Friday night. So please don't be shy. Get around the live show chat. Put your hand up if you want to have something to say, and we'll be happy to have you on during the course of the show. Mac, the other one I thought looked good in patches was Jake Saligo. I thought he looked pretty good. And also the young lad, Zach Taylor, in patches, showed that he there's something to work with there as well.
Yeah, look, I feel sorry for Saligo because it looks like he might be the victim so that Sloane can get a spot on the bloody wing. And he was mainly played on a half-forward flank, but playing more high half-forward flank. Saligo looked absolutely classy every time he got near the ball. And look, it's, to me, in some ways, it's going to ruin his development to some degree. He did get a few turns in the centre, which was good. But yeah, look, he is a rising star, and Sloane is a fading one. But it looks like Sloane's going to have that wing because.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
You don't.
No.
You don't think so?
No, not at all.
He spent nearly all his time there, Fiend. So
yes, I know, but there was two teams on the ground. Sloane won't start on the wing. I could almost guarantee you that. You know,
so
he did a couple of good things, Sloaney, but he looked hesitant at times.
Had a burst. He had one burst where he was good.
Yeah. I don't think they'll run him up and down a wing. I think that's Saligo's spot. Chase Jones had a bit of a run there too. Mitch Hinge obviously had a bit of a run there too. You know, if anything, they might rotate the three of them or the four of them through that area, but I don't think it's Sloane's alone.
You mentioned Jones there, and disposal was a bit poor a couple of times, but I tell you what, he's a lot more solid, and he's certainly went in very, very hard for the ball. And I actually thought he played a pretty reasonable game. He put his name out there to say, I'd like to be in the first 22 anyhow.
Well, and that's all we can ask for him. I mean, I think the time is well past to start to keep on going about, you know, where he was taken in the draft and all that. I think it's really now just assessing the type of player that he is and how we can utilise his skills. He's got some skills. He's not bad by foot. He's extremely hard at it. He's a straight line player. He sometimes lacks a bit of situational awareness and a bit of game awareness. But he's certainly not the worst in the squad, Mac. And, you know, I'd be quite happy having him running off a back pocket or a half-back flank. I can see him taking Luke Brown's spot, to be honest.
Yeah, and every chance of that, in my opinion. I think he deserves if he's going to play at that standard, he will certainly deserve a spot in the side. Somebody in the chat said McHenry looked like the class of Rankin, Saligo, Rochelle, Taylor, Pedler have gone straight past McHenry, and that's true. I mean, seriously, playing in the yellow team, McHenry, it really showed up his deficiencies playing against the better team. He wasn't able to. Well, he just looked like a little scruffy try hard, but which didn't really do much.
Yeah, and that was always the question mark on Ned, wasn't it? Whether he could step up in class, whether he could take his game to another level. We know what he brings. He brings, you know, effort and tenacity and desperation. But he's not a goal sneak, Mac, and he doesn't have a long kick. And you know, I think if the game's going to develop, if our game plan is going to develop this season, then Ned needs to add a couple of strings to his bow, and I think he might have just been overtaken, as has probably Lockie Murphy as well, I think.
Yeah, I think that also stands true. Murphy didn't do much at all in playing in the yellow side as well when he was playing against a better team. So, you know, very hard for the boys in the yellow team. I'm not dismissing that at all, because you've got the best against the rest. But by the same token, the ones that really stand out, if they can stand out when they're playing the better side, well then they've really got something to offer. Murphy, no, I didn't see much of him all day. And I say McHenry, just a few scraggy little things, but I think both those two boys are really going to be, they'll be relying on injuries to get a game, I think.
Yeah, and look, that's where the squad needs to be, Macca. There needs to be blokes. We know that those blokes can come in and play a role if needs be, but they're not first 22 players. And that's a healthy position for the squad to be. I've been doing a little bit of research for a little video that I'm going to be putting out on Tuesday with regards to squad development, and it's quite interesting to see of the past premiers since I went back to about 2010, I think, how the squad develops over time, and the players that carry through the development of the squad, and you'd be surprised at how much turnover there is and how much list movement there is. And there's really, from in a 5-year period, a lot of the premiership sides have turned over 75% of their list. So, these boys, I'd almost put Ben Keys in a bit of that situation if he's not careful, particularly if a bloke like Lukey Pedler comes on. It's starting to become a bit of a squeeze in that midfield with Rory Laird being the senior head, but Sam Berry and Harry Schoenberg and Luke Pedler, Jake Saligo, these boys coming through now are going to make it very hard for a bloke like Benny Keys to get a run through the midfield. So you'll see the squad evolve, I think, and so I'm not disappointed that the likes of McHenry and Murphy, etc., are just being pushed a little bit aside and finding it a little bit harder to break through, because I think that's where they're at, to be honest.
Yep, and you mentioned Keys. He wasn't an automatic midfielder as he has been in the past, and he was sometimes he was on a wing or sometimes he was in a half-forward flank, and he found life a lot more difficult than when he's roaming around on the ball unchecked, and so he's another one that could have troubles during the year. He'd probably start off in the 22, but he's going to have to work it out and perform a little bit better than I thought he did on the weekend to maintain it.
Yeah, well, they've got to have more than one string to their bow, Mac. And, we've got blokes now running through half forward like Rankin and Rochelle who've got class about them. They know where the goals are. They're good below their feet. They're adequate in the air. It's not an easy forward line to break into. And if you're Ned McHenry or Lockie Murphy, there's not a lot of other spots that you can fill, really. They've been playing those high half-forward roles, but I think our game plan is going to evolve this year. And I don't see us playing so high up the ground with those small forwards. So, I don't know whether there's necessarily a role for those fellas, particularly as the game plan evolves.
Yep. Another guy I thought really, really, really shone was Berry. I thought Berry was fantastic. He really looked like he's a real A-grader now, isn't he?
Yep, he's an A-grader. He's, when he came into the side, there was probably a query as to whether he was a bit one-dimensional, whether he was just a bullocking midfielder, but he's got that burst. He's got such a strong core, Macca, that he's able to carry the ball through congestion and moves the ball forward. And when you compare him to someone like Matt Crouch, who was our extractor in the past, the ability for Sam to push through contests and to push through congestion and keep the ball free and move the ball forward compared to Matty Crouch sort of, balking and going sideways or backwards, it's such a difference.
Yeah, you mentioned Matty Crouch. He wasn't absolutely hopeless on the weekend. There were times when he actually did do what he should do when he got the ball, and then unfortunately there were probably equal number of times when he had a relapse back to his old habit of either sort of going backwards, or if he had a mark or a free, then in just standing and looking for ages before he did anything. So I can see him possibly getting a game of everybody, with injuries, but not as a regular, no.
I don't think he was too bad in general play. Around stoppage, I didn't think he was that good, and you're right. Sometimes with ball in hand, he just seemed to, have a bit of the old Matt Crouch, a bit of the Jake Kellys about him, where he didn't really know what to do and ended up, with a nothing sideways kick. I mean, he looks very fit. He did a bit of two-way running, which is good to see, because that's been a bit of a knock on him at times. But certainly there are other when you looked at how Sam moved the ball through congestion when you looked at how Harry Schomburg moved the ball through the midfield. Irrespective of the fact that the disposal wasn't great as a first hit out, the intent was there, and I like the intent of those two boys better than someone like Matty Crouch.
Yeah, as I said, Crouch, I can see he might get a game during the year with injuries, but he's not going to be a regular, no.
Well, the trouble with Matty Crouch, Macca, is that there's only one position on the ground that he can play. His opportunities are very limited. He can't play a wing. He can't play off half-back. He's not really a forward. He can only really play as a midfielder, and really only as an extracting midfielder. And you would think that, both of Berry and Laird would have to go down for Matty to get a run. And that's not to say that his game is still not evolving and that he can keep working on it. He's certainly got the talent and the skill. And he seems to be running on top of the ground, which is probably the most pleasing thing from my perspective that I saw from him. But he's got to get the confidence back to be able to move the ball forward.
Yeah. Dawson outstanding, of course. I thought Dawson just makes the game look easy, doesn't he?
Yeah, I was a bit disappointed how they used him, Macca. But I understand his value as a quarterback. Through defence and setting up play and all the rest of it. But he's so dangerous when he pushes up the ground and is playing through the midfield and sneaking forward. And I just feel like there's other players that can play that quarterback role in defence. Tom Diday can play that quarterback role in defence. There's a couple of others that can do it. And I hope that's not what they've earmarked the new captain to be doing, because I just think it's a waste of resources.
Well, it's interesting that, Hinge was on the wing and Dawson was at half back. And you'd almost think that Dawson's going to play in the back lines this year the way that the game was played, because every time there was a point kick, Dawson went back to take the ball as well. So...
that's right. And he should be a connector, Mac. He shouldn't be the one kicking out. If we haven't got another bloke that we can trust kicking out from goal, then there's something wrong.
I think that might be the point, Fane. We don't have another one we can trust kicking out.
Well, they need to develop someone, because that's a waste of Jordan Dawson. He's kicking the ball out from defence. He's not at the next contest, which is where we really want him to be, because that's where he can be most dangerous.
Oh, look, yeah, he's good wherever he is. Let's face it, he's good wherever he is. But what you're saying is more damaging if he can be further up the ground and become an attacking weapon rather than a clearing weapon.
Well, it's maximising the use of your resources, in my opinion. And Jordan will, he'll rack up 30 touches a game playing off half back. But is it going to turn into scoreboard? That's what I wonder. Is it just going to be a bit like last year where the ball just kept bouncing back? And yes, I know we seem to be looking a little bit better up forward, but the simple fact is that if he's playing so deep in defence, he's not the one kicking the ball into our forwards, which is where I'd like to see him.
Yeah. One of the comments in the chat is that our defence isn't that good, and that'll be one of the reasons why he's playing back there. I half agree with that comment, mate. We're not at this stage 100%. Lockdown where we would like to be in defence.
Mm.
And I think that's the reason why he's there. I think that say that somebody like Keane comes along during the year and can hold down a spot, which I think will happen about halfway during the year. I can see once Keane's got some games under his belt, I think he's got attributes that I liked. We didn't see a lot of him, but when he did do something, I did like it. So I think that Dawson will definitely start in defence. Maybe he'll work his way up as the year goes on.
The point about our defence not being 100% yet, it harkens back to what we were talking about last week, Macca. If we're going to change our game plan and become more aggressive and more attacking, and we saw the way we moved the ball, we were certainly hitting up players more, and there was more possession in transition, which I really liked. But we cannot continue to have another season where we just protect the downside. And to me, having Jordan Dawson in defence because our defence isn't good enough is just, it's risk aversion. And we've got 450 players that can play half-back, and we need to find out whether those players are good enough to play half-back. You know, Josh Worrell, Tom Diday, Patrick Parnell, Brody Smith, Wayne Miller, who should be good enough to take kick-outs and should be good enough to be that first player out of defence. You mentioned Keane as well now. We've got a ton of players that can play back there. Chase Jones is another. We have to find out. We cannot continue to protect the scoreboard to minimise losses at the expense of developing our squad. In my opinion, it'll be a real negative to me if that's what happens.
Well, I think we'll start off that way, Pete, but I think that and I do think that Keane is one of the answers back there. Because I think for a guy that's been here 30 minutes, you know, he did very, very well for that time. If he can play that role back there, that just gives it a lot more solidity to back there, and Dawson can move up. The other thing too, of course, is I think that Hinge and Dawson are interchangeable, in my opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would reverse those roles, and I said that last year as well. I found it a bit strange. I think Hinge is a natural halfback flanker. Actually, attacks the ball really well in the air. You know, is good by foot, can break a line. Seems to be the prototype halfback flanker, if you ask me. But they prefer him on the wing. I think Mitch prefers it on the wing as well. But I'm with you, Mac, on that one. I would swap them.
Yep. And the one who played pretty well, I thought, was Hamill. I thought Hamill showed a fair bit of dash off the half-back flank.
Yep, he did. And again, another bloke who can break a line. And I guess this is my point, Mac, that we are spoilt for choice in that regard. And you know, we need to give Hamill and those blokes a run at it and see if they can make those positions their own, rather than just taking the easy option.
How did you see Miller's game?
I thought it was pretty average, but I'm just not like. And he had a few mates, I think, but it's a pre-season intra-club trial, Macca. You know what they're like. The skills are usually horrific. The opposition know exactly what you're going to do, so they can put themselves exactly where they need to put you, which means that the game becomes quite congested. We saw the coaches, manipulate things a little bit and try at certain scenarios, so it's not a true reflection. So I'm willing to give most players a pass, but there were certainly a couple of players, and Junior was one of them, that hopefully will be better for the run.
I hope so, because I was actually, he had moments, but the moments for winning was generally on his own, and they kicked the ball out to him on his own. Didn't see a lot of him in congestion at all.
No, and you know, we've spoken about players like that. Lucky Shoal's another one, although I thought Shoal wasn't too bad.
He actually played well for him. I went back and had a look. He had a lot of the ball.
Yep, and you know, those outside players, that's fine as long as they don't squib when it's their turn to go. I don't think Miller really squibs, although he can be a little bit tentative at times. But they need to maximise their weapons, and for both Miller and Lockie Shoal, it's disposal, and it's constructive disposal. They need to be cutting through zones and breaking lines and you know, getting some penetration with their disposal. So, you know, if Junior comes on and or Lockie you know, ramps up his form a bit, then they're very handy players on the outside.
Yeah, I also thought Murray was pretty reasonable. He's big and strong, and he burst through quite a few times. I thought that he looked reasonably good.
Yeah, what you see is what you get with Muzz. You know, I asked Elliot Himmelberg during the week whether he you know, softens it down at training, and he said no, he's 100 miles an hour at training, and You just try not to get in front of him too often. And I'm a bit of a fan. I know there's a lot of knocks on him in terms of his disposal and sometimes his decision making. I think he's a good old-fashioned defender. I think he tries his guts out, and what I like the most about him is he's probably, I would say, pound for pound, our best aerial contester in the whole squad.
Yeah, and he doesn't mind bashing into people either, with his body when he's in the air. He's a weapon. And
Well, the thing is, he doesn't. He can take a specky, but he can also kill a contest. And we don't have many players, forward, back, or anywhere else, that can do that. He's one of the few that can do that. He can kill a contest. He can hurt opposition. He can take a big mark. I place a bit of value on that, particularly as a defender.
Yeah, I had a few listed down for disappointment, Fiend, and you just tell me what you think about those. Like Keys we have discussed, and I didn't think his game was that meritorious. We mentioned Jones and Crouch. Hately, he had his moments, but of course he was on the losing side, which makes it hard. Not much there. I thought Philpott was disappointing.
Just backtracking, I think Jack's going to find it hard, to be honest with you. He's got a lot of good attributes, but the ones that he's not so good at are quite damaging in terms of his lack of pace, his disposal at times, intensity, I guess. So yeah, it wasn't the kind of performance from Jackson that's going to put his name up in lights in terms of first round selection. Riley Thilthorpe, yeah, patchy. I thought I thought he lacked intensity in rucking contests and also aerial contests. I thought Riley O'Brien monstered him whenever they were together. But I look, he's a kid, Mac. He's a kid. A 200 centimetre kid.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I probably did expect just a little bit more, but no, you're quite right. O'Brien did monster him, no doubt about that. I thought Pedler was half reasonable. Had some good moments.
I thought Peds was more than half reasonable. I thought he showed quite a bit. And he's only going to get better if he can get a run at it and stay on the park and get his fitness up. Then I think he's going to be a weapon. Elliot Himmelberg, I was disappointed with Elliot. Same sort of thoughts about Elliot that I had about Riley, to be honest. The rest of our forward line looked okay. Tex and Fogg and Patches looked okay. What I really liked overall was our movement into the forward 50. I harped on that all last year, Macca, in terms of the depth of our entries and the fact that we were just kicking high ball to contests that we were never going to win. I didn't see a huge amount of that. I saw a lot of drop in the eyes, and I saw a lot of 25-metre chip passes to about 40 metres out, which I really liked.
Yep, I think that's a fair comment. There's obviously that is the plan. That is to blow the eyes and try and get the 20, 30 metre pass onto somebody's chest. There's no doubt about that. Because that was one of our faults really for the last 2 years, just bombing it into the forward line and just rebounding back out again.
Well, I mean, and again, Mac, if you remember my analysis, a lot of that was due to where we were actually launching our forward 50 entries from last year. And often it was from, centre or thereabouts, around that.
Or behind.
75 metres out sort of thing, where we'd get it to about the 45 metre mark with a high ball. If you notice, a lot of the entries into forward 50 on Friday night were actually from about 60 out, and they were more considered in terms of they were looking for a pass or looking for an option. They weren't just high bombs. So I think what we saw was probably the consequence of two things. First of all, we were carrying the ball further up the ground before we went into our forward 50. And second, when we went forward, often when we went into our forward 50, often we were lowering the eyes and looking for a leading target, or at least putting it to the advantage of a bloke rather than just sitting on top of blokes' heads.
Yeah. One other guy that didn't stand out where he stood out for not doing very much was Himmelberg. But in fairness to him, he was tried in the back lines and he was tried in the ruck. And I don't think either of those two are his position.
Well, he played juniors in the back lines, Mac, before
Did
he
he?
got to us.
Didn't know
Yep,
that.
centre half back. He obviously didn't listen to our interview on Tuesday, but that's okay.
I did actually.
Oh, you must have missed that bit.
Probably went to sleep.
Oh, wow. Sorry, you're breaking up, mate. Yeah, so, I mean, in my discussion with Elliot, he much prefers to play forward, but he did say that he's prepared to play wherever he can to get a game. I just think he's a confidence player, Macca. I was watching a few highlights over the weekend that included Matthew Robin, and I've always thought that Elliot Himmelberg could be that guy for us. He's never going to dominate a game, but he has an impact, sometimes an intangible impact on the way we move the ball. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's an interesting character because when he plays, he's been played up forward last year at times. In fact, ironically, I think we won a lot more games when he was up at the full forward than when he wasn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I've just reminded of the people in the live studio that if you want to have your say and pass on your opinions, please go ahead and stick your hand up. I'd love to have you on board. Berger's always been that kind of bloke. You're waiting for him to take the next step. He admitted to us on Tuesday that he was looking for more consistency. He was looking to. He sees himself as one of the more senior players in the squad now. He's 25, been in the squad for 6 years. He wants to take the next step. He wants to be consistent, be a consistent contributor, and lead by example. So the attitude's there. He's just got to put it together now.
Yeah, it's the question of where his spot is, if there is a spot for him. That's the real question.
Look, I think I honestly think that there's an opportunity for a three-way rotation between Berg, Thilthorpe, and O'Brien, with Berg and Thilthorpe predominantly up forward and O'Brien predominantly in the ruck, but switching around every so often. Particularly now that there's an extra bloke on the bench this year, and we've got the medical subs, so we've got 25 on the bench now, plus 93 medical subs or something or other. I don't know how much. What is it? Five on the bench now, plus a sub. Is that what it is now?
I don't think they're. I don't know bloody what it is. I think it's just there is no medical sub. It's just a sub, isn't it?
Well, it's something like that, but it's 5 and a sub, I think.
5 and a sub or 4 and a sub?
I don't know. It's a lot. There's enough room for a bloody ruckman on the bench.
Well, I think it's 4 and a sub thing.
Well, there's enough room for a ruckman on the bench, particularly if it's a ruck forward.
Well, every game will be different, of course. Depends who you're playing against.
Anyway, I guess you take from it whatever you take the positives from a game like that, and you kind of not gloss over the negatives, but you're prepared to give it a bit more time. Pardon me. The skills are always going to be average under those circumstances. A lot of the other games that were played, trial games, were similarly average in terms of skill. So I don't think there's anything to be concerned about there. I guess, Mac, apart from the forward entry movement, did you see anything else that stood out to you as maybe something a little bit different to what we have seen from the Crows in the past?
Not really. I can't think of anything different. The one thing which did stand out was the fact that they tried to lower their eyes and do the 25-metre pass or 30-metre pass where possible, or in one case where they kicked it long over the top so Rankin could run onto it. So a little bit better usage of the ball going forward, but I couldn't see much else different in the game.
Yeah, I can see a little bit of Joe the Goose happening this year. I can see our forwards pushing up and leaving a paddock, a bit of Pagan's paddock going on there for Isaac or Josh Rosselli or someone to run on. One person we didn't speak of, by the way, is Shane McAdam. I thought he played quite well and absolutely got destroyed by the coaches blowing the whistle to change things up just as he was mid-air for a massive hang just after, just about 5 minutes into the third quarter. He took a beautiful hang and the game had stopped.
Yes. But there was also the young lad, he's going to be he's an on-baller. Just struggling for your name. He's very, very good at darting backwards and forwards and twisting and turning.
Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor, yeah. I thought that he showed glimpses. I mean, he might not be quite ready yet, but he will play AFL footy. There's no doubt about that.
I think so. I mentioned him at the beginning and happy to expand on it. I thought all he's got to do, I think, is build up a little bit of a frame, Macca, because obviously he's not the tallest bloke going around. So he's going to have to build a little bit of a frame, but he's certainly a footballer. Certainly a footballer.
Can dance around, can't he?
Yeah, absolutely. So I liked him. We got glimpses from the Irishman that I thought were really good. I think that he will end up in our best 22 by the end of the season. He's just got to, probably get some fitness up, and he looked a little bit chubby to me, but he certainly plays with the signature aggression and straight line sort of attitude that the Irishmen do.
Have you ever thought of getting him on for an interview and perhaps need an interpreter as well, Pete?
Well, I don't get to choose, unfortunately, Macca, but I'm sure that if we do get him on, that I will need someone. I'll need captions, I think.
Seriously, I've heard him on the radio, and that's why I made the comment. He's a little bit hard to understand, but I do like him. I do, once he's got that big frame a little bit fitter, and he's a massive frame.
He's a big boy, isn't he? Yeah.
And, but he's got reasonably good pace too to go with it. So I've got no doubt that by the mid-year at the latest, he'll be in our side.
Yeah. And, most people know, but a reminder that those that don't, he was on the verge of breaking into the Collingwood team just before COVID, and obviously had to go back due to homesickness and the lockdowns and all that sort of palaver. But, he'd progressed really well through the Collingwood system and, had played a few games and was probably going to be in their best 22. So we've scored a pretty good player there.
Yep. No, they were pretty shitty that we landed him and they didn't get him back.
Yeah. So a coup for us there. Riley O'Brien in ruck I didn't think was fantastic. Didn't see a lot of marking around the ground. Thought his tap work was okay considering he wasn't getting a lot of opposition. Seemed to be a little bit more structure in those setups, though, Macca, in terms of getting the ball to the advantage. So if that's an outcome, then that's a positive outcome, because that was our big knock on Riley last year, that he'd get 1,000 taps, but, his taps to advantage would be like 10%.
He's no ballerina though, is he?
No, he's never going to win any sort of graceful award or anything like that.
No.
But here's the thing, there've been ruckmen around that we could have got, and the argument is, you don't spin at a ruckman, Well, you can't have it both ways, right? You either get an A-grade ruckman who is just a large on-baller, like Riley Thilthorpe, I think will be, or you have Riley O'Brien, who's an average footballer, who's tall, who's strong, and who can tap the ball. And my knock on Riley has always been, or my thing with Riley has always been, he gives us most value when he's taking marks around the ground. When he's not taking marks around the ground, he's pretty much useless. And that was where I felt he lacked last year. His his presence around the ground and his productivity around the ground really dropped off. Whether that's through hard work or he's carrying injury, I'm not sure, but I'd like to see that improve.
Can't argue with that, Payne.
So, Kieran Strawn didn't do a hell of a lot. The other two we've already spoken about. So, ruck's still a little bit of an issue. But to me, Macca, I mean, when you look at the blokes running around and you look at the blokes that were running around in the yellow team, the seconds, particularly at the beginning, which probably gave you an idea of who was most in favour, there's a lot of good building blocks there. I'd say we've got a top 5 forward line talent-wise now. Easily talent-wise, top 5 in the competition.
Yeah, our forward line is definitely our best section on the ground. There's no doubt about that.
Tex Fogarty, Shane McAdam, Lockie Gallant sometimes, Josh Rochelle, Isaac Rankin, a bit of Berg, a little bit of Himmelberg, maybe a bit of Benny Keys running through there.
A little bit of Saligo.
A bit of Saligo. There's a lot of talent there. A lot of talent. So, and our midfield is developing. I think there's slowly a changing of the guard. I'm so pleased to see Harry strip fitter this season, and I hope he can realise his potential. Sam Berry, as you spoke about, just goes from strength to strength and will be an elite midfielder in the competition, in my opinion. Rory Laird just keeps on keeping on. And, there's a couple of others on the outskirts that are starting to push through, Saligo and Taylor and that. I still think we're probably one short in class in the mids. Whether Luke Pedler ends up being that bloke, I'm not sure, Mac.
Not sure that he'll be a mid, Dean.
He'll be a mid.
He'll have to get a lot fitter than he is now to do that, of course.
Well, he won't get a game as a forward.
Well, he played most of his game as a forward.
Macca, we just went through the forward line. Where are you going to play him, on top of the goalpost? There's no room for him. There's no room for him.
Well, the old rotation with the extra sub and all that you were talking about.
We already named about 9 forwards. So I agree. He's been playing forward, but he is a midfielder. You can't tell me that we spent pick 10 on another bloody forward. He's a midfielder. We picked him as a midfielder.
We picked 6 on a bloke that can't play.
I know. Let's not go there.
Look,
I think if Pedler doesn't make it as a midfielder, it's a failed pick, in my opinion.
Well, as they said in the chat, quite rightly, he has been training as a forward all season so far. I'm not saying that he won't ultimately become a midfielder, but this year I think the challenge, because he's had troubles with his body, etc. I think the idea with him fit is just to play him in the forward line and build his confidence and build his game up, and then he may well go into the midfield next year.
Most likely, but I'll repeat, if Luke Pedler doesn't make it as a midfielder, he's a failed pick.
Well, as PJ Crow says, we kicked 30 goals a year, he's not.
Yeah, but how many top end? We've got Isaac Rankin we spent pick 5 on. We've got Josh Rochelle that we picked. We spent a top pick on. You're telling me now Luke Pedler as well as a top end pick. That's 3 top end picks that we've used on small forwards.
Well, then we would have a bloody good forward line then.
Which is no use to anyone if we can't get the ball down there.
No, look, I honestly think that this year, and the fact, the way he's been used in the pre-season, the way he got used on the weekend, he's basically been used as, he'll get maybe a little turn in the midfield, but he'll be primarily a forward.
I did hear you, and I repeat, if he ends up being nothing more than a small forward, it's a wasted pick.
Time will tell, man. Time will tell.
So I think we've pretty much covered it. Didn't see a lot of Tyler Brown. It didn't really stand out at all. Of the other lads, Bond did 1 or 2 things. Got a bit of a feeling about Bond. I reckon he might come through.
Put him in the back pocket. He was, mate. They played him in the back pocket.
Yeah, I know.
Strong boy. He did a couple of nice things back there. Tyler Brown did 2 nice clearances from the centre. but didn't see a lot of him apart from that.
No. Nankervis had a few moments. Wasn't the worst. Didn't see a lot from Ben Dowling, but that's to be expected. Step up in class.
Billy Dowling.
Billy Dowling, sorry. Lockie Gallant wasn't too bad.
Yeah, limited opportunities, of course.
Yeah, Braden Cook didn't play. So Andy McPherson obviously didn't play, I don't think.
No, he didn't play, no.
So, I mean...
Parnell.
It wasn't Parnell was... I'm not a big fan of Parnell.
I'm not either, thing.
I don't see what all the fuss is about.
I actually think I prefer Jones in the back pocket before Parnell.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. But we both like hard players.
Yeah, we do.
I should qualify that. I don't think Parnell's a soft player. He runs straight lines as well, but he's just so damn light.
And McElhaney did a couple of things, but his body's got to grow into a lot bigger and stronger before he'll be playing.
Yeah, well, he was running around with ranking it for a while there, and I think that was a little bit of a baptism of fire for the lad. He looks taller on the ground than what I thought he was, Mac.
He's a reasonable size. He is a reasonable size. He'll probably take Duday's place when he nicks off at the end of the year.
No, he looks taller than that. I wonder if he'll develop into a key position player. Just to my eye, I just looked at him and I thought, geez, you look a lot taller than what I pictured you.
He is a good size. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, so interesting to see how he develops. He's certainly not best 22 right now, but you could see enough that he's got a football brain and he's got a good pedigree. So hopefully he has a good run in the twos and starts pushing up. Josh Worrell, I thought, looked a little bit rusty early, but did a couple of good things later on. It was what it was, really.
Did Worrell actually play?
Yeah, he did.
I can't remember seeing him play.
Yeah, did a couple of things.
Okay. Yeah, I just don't remember. In the chat, they actually saying they thought that Phil Thorpe was the worst player for the Crows. And look, I was very disappointed in his game. I was really disappointed. He looked like he's lost in not knowing where he's supposed to be and what he's supposed to be doing.
What do you want me to say to that? He's a kid.
Yeah, just it's only a comment.
I mean, you cannot be disappointed with the third, like the beginning of the third season of a kid he's not even 20 yet. He's 200 centimetres. He hasn't grown into his body. He's got all the skills you ever want. He's obviously finding his way in terms of positioning and understanding his strength and all that sort of stuff. We shouldn't even be talking about Riley Thilthorpe. We should not even be talking about him.
Well, you have to call it as you see it, Fiend, and I know everything you're saying is true. I'm not disagreeing with anything of that, but by the same token, I just thought that he would have been just a bit better than that. Yeah, time will tell. That's only one game.
So name me another 200 centimetre 20-year-old that was consistently good in their second, third season.
Oh God, you'd have to allow me time to look through all the teams for that, Pete.
Well, Logan McDonald, someone says Logan McDonald in the chat. Logan McDonald was out of the side for a long time with Sydney and has had one or two good games, but you can't say that he's looked okay. So you can't say that he seems to be going okay.
He struggled a little bit last year, though. Towards the end of the year, he started to look like he belonged.
Well, so did Riley. Remember, so did Riley. The last 3 or 4 games that Riley played, he was attacking the ball really well.
Yeah, look, maybe it takes the taller players longer. I don't know, but anyhow, I'd like to see Thilthorpe just play up to these capabilities. I'm sure his capabilities are much more than what we're seeing, Dean.
Well, his
I think
capabilities will be what they be. I just feel like we need to lay off the kid
yeah, I think it's
because
more
he's
mental
still.
though.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is. But, if everyone starts dumping high expectations on him at the beginning of his third year, when the lad's not even 20, then do you think that's going to do much good for his um, you know, mental preparation and his confidence?
Look, it's a very hard life being a high draft pick, and particularly when you're a tall. I mean, Jack Watt, for example, experienced that situation as well.
Yeah,
That
but
they played him.
Jack Watts wasn't that good.
No, but they played him too early, out of position, in when he first came, and I think that sort of done him for the rest of his career. But I think I accept that the taller blokes take more time to come on, and but I think that Thilthorpe has got so much natural ability that at the moment I think his only enemy is himself, but he's not 100% believing in himself at the moment.
Well, the simple fact that you can recognise the amount of ability that he's got tells me that he's done enough things in his first couple of seasons of footy for us to be quietly confident that he's going to turn into a really good player for us.
I think long term he will. Yeah,
Well then, what's the problem?
I'd like it to be now.
Yeah, well, I'd like to have a Ferrari, like you.
I haven't got a Ferrari.
All right. Okay, so that we've pretty much done the trial to death. Obviously, next week we go over to Western Australia and we play both the Perth teams over there. I think the Fremantle one is a 6-quarter game that everyone gets a run, but I think the West Coast one is much more of a. I think we'll see who likely will be starting 22 or 23 or however many it is now in that West Coast game next weekend.
Yeah, look, the first game against Freo is a friendly, if you want to put it that way.
Yep.
It's
six quarters, isn't it?
Yeah, 6 quarters, and Rafferty's rules in terms of who you put on and who you take off. So they're not. It's not an AFL game. It's a scratch match type of game arranged with Freo. The West Coast one will be is an AFL prescribed trial match, and everything goes under AFL rules for that one.
Yep. And then we get a week's break, and then we're into it. Is that right? That's about right, isn't it?
I know. I'm working feverishly on my dream team at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and that's a good segue, Mac. Just a reminder to everyone that if you want to be part of the CrowCast Fantasy Footy League, the links are in the what's the channel called on Discord? Fantasy and Tipping, under the competitions bit there. Go in there, find your link, make your team, get around it. I still don't think they've released the tipping thingy yet. On the AFL site.
The ESPN tipping thing?
No, AFL tipping.
Don't know.
I don't think it's up and running yet. But that's okay. Keep your eyes out. As soon as that's up and about, we'll put the links in as well. And okay. Don't forget too that we're doing our monthly T-shirt giveaway. So click the link that's in the monthly giveaway channel if you would like to get. Macca, show us your T-shirt.
Well, actually, Plain actually doesn't have this particular.
There you go. Look at that.
Yeah.
That's a one of a kind that people can actually get from the merch shop. If anyone wants to go and buy some merch, just go to aflcrowcast.com and go to the merch bit, and you'll be able to see all the stuff we got there. And one of the things that we've got there is that T-shirt. Now, I don't think we'll be giving that one away, Macca, in our February T-shirt giveaway. It might be the one without Macca the legend. But here's the thing that people don't realise. Whoever the winner is gets to personalise the same as what you just did. So yours says Macca the legend.
Macca is a legend.
Oh, yeah, but I
Hang
mean,
on. Hang on. Wait a
I
minute.
think,
Oh, you're right. Macca the legend. It's Macca the legend.
I know. But whoever wins the t-shirt giveaway will have the opportunity to have some personalisation on their t-shirt as well. So that's just a little added thing. So if you want to be a part of that, we'll be doing one of those every month. So just have a look at the monthly giveaway channel for the link. All right, that's enough of gratuitous plugs. Matt, we had the release of the remainder of the leadership group announced during the week. And the noticeable absentee that I saw was no Rory Laird, which really surprised me.
Well, I think that's a fair comment, actually, because, I mean, the way that Rory busts his guts in the midfield and has, but I think he's won, is it 2 of the last 3 best and fairest as well?
Yep.
I've 1990 crazy, he's never been a leader and doesn't want to be one. Well, that might be right, but he certainly does lead by example. And it is an interesting factor. Sometimes your better players aren't necessarily a good leader either, in terms of having that inspirational character to actually inspire others to go, to do better than they are. Dawson was apparently chosen as a captain really during last year because of the way that, as the game was going along, he just naturally was inspiring the players around him to do this and to do that. And so he was showing the leadership qualities without being the captain at the time. And leadership is a thing that either comes naturally to you, or sometimes some players just can't do it, and it's probably best left alone. So, it might be just a good thing to leave Lairdy alone because he's playing bloody good football. Duday was sort of thinking he was going to be the next captain. So that's him. And Smith's the senior, and who's the other one? O'Brien, is that right?
And Ben Keys.
Well, yeah. That's a little bit dubious when you've got a guy that might struggle for a spot at some stage during the year. So,
look, I must admit I'm not enamoured with the leadership group, Macca. I'm not enamoured with it at all.
Yours would have been what?
Well, I wouldn't have Riley O'Brien in there, and I wouldn't have had Benny Keys in there. I would have had Rory Laird in there unless he really, really didn't want to be there. And I would have had one of the young fellas in there, probably Sam Berry.
Too early for Sam.
No, it's not. Not to be in a leadership group. No, it's not. No, it's not. It doesn't mean anything apart from... Because what we've found in the past, and I've got no inkling about what the culture is like down there right at this very second, and we know that it's been overhauled and all the rest of it, but what the Crows have suffered from in the past is a disconnect between the seniors and the juniors, right? That's been a big knock. It was one of the big problems that we had in 2017, is a disconnect between the senior players and the young lads, right?
You're right. You're right.
And what better way to have a connection between your leadership group to all areas of your list, of your squad, is to have someone representing the younger lads on there. And I couldn't think of a better bloke than Sam Berry to be on there.
Look, your logic's very good, and I think he will be probably in the future. But clubs are very conservative, and look, I think you're quite right about you're saying about the connect between the senior players and the junior players. I think that's very important, and 2017 showed that up dramatically. Look, it wouldn't be a bad thing to have Sam Berry there. I agree with you. Smith, the question mark. Keys is a huge question mark. So, yeah, if Sam Berry was there and sitting in place of one of those, I certainly wouldn't be upset. O'Brien, I'm not surprised that O'Brien's there, though.
Why?
Look, he may not. Well, he's not the most talented person on earth, but in terms of absolutely effort and example of just sheer effort, I think he's good in that respect.
I 100% disagree. He got dropped twice last year for a lack of effort, Macca.
Lack of effort or ability?
Effort. It was effort that they wanted to see. Getting to contests. That's what they wanted to see. Remember, he went back and got a 40-touch game in the twos. But what we weren't seeing from him in the ones was effort. So I disagree with you on that one. Riley
Well,
also.
I'm not going to fight you for it because he's not worth fighting for.
No. But what I'm saying is, like, let's be true here with what we're saying. Riley O'Brien is also a little bit aloof, and connects more with the more intellectual area of the list, which I'd suggest would be a fairly small group. It'd be him and Nathan Van Berlo, and maybe, I don't know.
It's not even how many fingers it's not even how many fingers you got. It's how many thumbs you got. that group.
And Brodie Smith and Ben Keys may not be in the side by the end of the season.
Well, look, he could be right. It's not. Look, after Dawson and after Duday, it's not a strong leadership group. I agree.
Well, and from what we heard today, Macca, Tom's got some work to do on his leadership skills as well, and his effort on the track. That really surprised me. That one.
That was a surprise, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm fairly confident with the source, though.
I better speak to him to lift his game.
Yeah, fairly confident in the source that. And look, Elliot said inadvertently in his interview with us that there was a player vote for the captaincy, and it was a resounding win to Geordie Dawson. Now, considering that Tom Doedee has been the touted next leader for quite some years, and didn't get near it, basically, that tells you something.
All right. They're wanting to know in the chat what's going on. Look, it's very simple, Finn. You tell them.
Oh, we just got a little word that perhaps there was some feedback given that a certain person needed to practice what he preached in terms of commitment on the track, and maybe his delivery needed some work in terms of how he related to people. Look, and it's only third-party scuttlebutt. Who knows? I don't know Tom as a person. Every time I've heard from Tom, he seems like a very classy, smart individual. So I wouldn't have a clue. But that's what passed our desk, wasn't it, Mac?
Yeah, that's what the word is. And, sometimes the word is right and sometimes it's wrong. But, we can only just say what we've heard.
Yeah. And, the Pandora's box opens. The door is a little bit ajar now, with regards to the fact that Tom's restricted free agent at the end of the season is obviously born not far away from Danger down at, I think, Doedee was at Lara, wasn't he? I think.
Yep, that's it.
So, and we know Geelong don't mind bringing an old Geelong boy home. So, look, I've got a lot of time for Tom Doedee as a player. I don't know him as a person, but as a player, I've got a lot of time for him. I feel like he played under duress last year, and I think people forget how good he was pre-ACL. And I think he'd be a loss. I think he'd be a big loss, to be honest with you.
Of course he's going to be a great loss, and I hope he has a great season and we get a first rounder for him from Dean.
Well, I'd rather keep him.
Well, I would too, but it's up to him, isn't it? I mean, at this stage, he hasn't signed his contract, and he's pushing it towards the end of the year. And in fact, you would think that just going by the statements that he made in that interview with 5AA, that he actually Dangerfield passed in the notes of what he said at the time.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually because Danger's in charge of the AFLPA now, so I think it's on their website. I think you just download the template. This is what you say when you want to delay your contract talks.
It was just about word for word what Dangerfield said. Just about word for word.
Yeah, no, look, probably a 50-50, I reckon. The fact that he's been put in the leadership group, uh, tells you that the club want him involved at that level. Um, you know, we're told that he was quite surprised by the feedback that he was given, and it'll be interesting to see how that pans out over the coming weeks. But as a player, pure and simple, take all the politics out of it and his contract status and all the rest of it. I hope he has a really good season. He's struggled to come back from his ACL. He had a lot of hand issues last year, and I just would like him to have a good, solid 22 games, because if he does, that'll go a long way towards us having a really good season. And what happens after that happens after that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll get a little bit of an idea of what the season's going to be like in the next two games. The one against Freo might be, I mean, Freo's a better side than West Coast, but it's not going to be as strict rules in terms of playing out 25-minute quarters, 20-minute quarters plus time on type situation like the second one will be. And, there'll be players coming and going backwards and forwards all the time. So, but I think that we'll get some idea out of it, in the sense that Freo, I think, are going to be up in the top four this year, Fiend. I think they're going to be a very, very good side.
That's a big call, Mac. Big call, Mac.
Yeah.
Top four.
Yeah. A side that's just been developing very nicely indeed, in my opinion.
Agreed. Maybe a year too early for mine, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, look, it could be, but unless they have injuries, I just think that they can actually do it this year to get in the top four.
Yep.
West Coast, I think they're still going to be a bottom four side, but I do think though that but somehow or other it was all exaggerated last year. I can't believe that they were as bad as they were. They were unfit, and then that's actually been stated that the players were unfit. And how can you be unfit when you start a year, thing?
Well, because they got absolutely flogged by the COVID lockdown rules. Don't you remember?
Oh.
They got absolutely stuffed around by the whole lockdown situation. They had so many things going on at that club. They could barely get a bloody 22 on the ground.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's probably, I think you just sort of got to forget that year, in the sense that I don't believe they're as bad as that.
No, I don't think they are either. Although I do think that their midfield is aging a little bit. But it's like if you got a squad that basically misses a pre-season, which a lot of that squad did, there's no coming back from that. There's absolutely no coming back from that. They may as well have forfeited and gone on a holiday. There's absolutely no way they were going to be competitive last year.
Right.
So, given they've had a normal pre-season this year, you'd expect them to be, sort of middle of the table, I would have thought, West Coast. So both of them are going to be good tests for a young squad. But this is the season, and the players have said this, Macca, this is the season that we need to start winning these games. And I'm not talking so much about the pre-season games, but winning games against these teams that are around us on the ladder. So a West Coast certainly is a team that we should be aiming to beat if we want to go up the ladder, and Freo, will be a really stern test.
I agree with you, Dean. And this is a year where we do have to, in my opinion, we must improve. We won 8 games last year. We have to be in that 10 to 12 game bracket at worst. That's what I think. And if we finish winning only 8 or 9 games, then I think that we've stalled.
Anything less than double figures, Macca, in my opinion, is a fail, and will put a lot of pressure on Matthew Nixon. Someone earlier, I think it might have been Arab, in the chat earlier, was asking about Nix, and that's kind of why I asked you earlier about whether you saw anything different in the game plan. We've spoken about Nix, and I don't want to go on too much about it this time, because we spent quite a bit of time on it last weekend. But we all know that this is the season for Matthew, not only in terms of results, but also in terms of can he come up with something that is going to move us forward in the same way that Longmuir's done at Fremantle.
Yeah, well, I think Nix has got a very preconceived idea of what he wants the players to be, and they haven't quite been it. Whether he's right, whether he's wrong, I don't know. It might be that the squad that he's got can't do what he wants them to do. What his theory is of how the game should be played for us to be successful. But I'd say he is under pressure this year, Pete. I mean, we do have to, as you say, get 10 or more wins. Otherwise, I think he's under pressure.
Well, I know. As I said, I don't want to spend too much time on it because we went on about it a fair bit last week. And I will be putting something up on YouTube during the week on this very topic. It's an interesting question, Mako. When you actually look into it, as I've spent a bit of time looking into it over the last few days, and you look at the records of the coaches that have won premierships in the last 20 years or so, and you look at the profile of their squad and the age profile of their squad over the course of their tenure, you start to realise that it's less about the coach and more about the squad. So I think really most coaches these days, to some degree, are victims of list management or just being involved with a team at the wrong time in the cycle. But there are some coaches, Alistair Clarkson, John Longmire, Chris Scott, Damien Hardwick, who have weathered that and have shown that when they have a squad at their disposal, they can make the most of their opportunities and they can win grand finals.
Well, and you're right about the fact that the coach, to some degree, is at the mercy of what he's been given by the bloody selectors of the drafting and trading, with the list management people. And there's no doubt about it. He is at their mercy to some degree. He can want and he can ask. And I mean, for example, just burning up a pick six on Fisher, for example, that could have been a top mid that he could have had, for example.
Yep. And that's not insignificant, because not only did we not get a top key defender, we didn't get a top anyone, right? So, and that pick would be in their third season now.
Yeah,
a third season mid, like a Harry Schonfeld just coming into their own, or someone of Sam Berry just coming into their own. It has a big impact. List management has a massive impact, but a list manager will get you in a position where you can maximise results. But I still think a good coach, based on the numbers that I've been looking at, it still takes a good coach to be able to grasp those opportunities. You look at a bloke like Malcolm Blight, right? His winning percentage was 55.5% over the course of his career with North Melbourne, Geelong and Adelaide. But and his grand final winning percentage was only 40%. 5 grand finals for 2 wins. Then you look at someone like Al Clarkson, whose winning percentage was 58 or just under 59%. But his, 4 flags out of 5 grand finals. So who would you say is the better coach?
Well, you'd say on stats, you'd say Clarkson, but who knows? If Blighty had the same teams, he might have done just as good.
John Longmire has a 63% win ratio, and yet has only a 25% win ratio in grand finals. Now, would you prefer him with a 63% win ratio over someone like a Mark Thompson, who had a 62% win ratio, but won 66 or 67%, 2/3 of the grand finals he appeared in? Which one would you rather?
Well, at the end of the day, you always take the flag, Fiend.
Well, and that's the thing, and I think that's the question that we need to find out about Matthew Nicks. Is Matthew Nicks just going to be not a victim, but are his results going to reflect our list management, or is he going to be able to take the team to the next level like a Chris Scott, like a Damien Hardwick, like a Mark Thompson, like an Al Clarkson? You look at a bloke like Ross Lyon, who's been in 4 grand finals, hasn't won one. And you could safely say that Ross Lyon has developed some very good teams, but does he have the ability to coach a team to a flag? And if he doesn't, what's the point?
Well, at the end of the day, there's only one prize, mate, and that's the flag.
Well, that's it. And that's what we've got to find out about Matthew Nicks, I guess. And we won't find that out this year. What we will find out about Matthew Nicks this year is whether he will fall victim to ultimately poor list selection. Because if he fails this year, it'll be on the back of 2 things: a conservative game plan, which I think will be brought about by a lack of confidence in the squad, Macca.
That's one of the factors, and the list management factor is very high because of we talked about McAtee, but we've also the wasting of the 2 draft picks on Chase Jones and McHenry. I mean, that's 3 critical appointments. You put in 3 A graders in terms of those three players, and you're talking about a different looking side.
But that's what I'm saying. By extension, the coach won't have confidence in the squad. It's brought about by list management. The coach gets a squad, and the squad is delivered by the list management team, of which the coach is one member of, but there are other members of that committee as well. And the coach has to do the best he can with that group. And if the coach, in his heart of hearts, hasn't got confidence in that squad, that he's going to play conservative. And I think we're going to find a lot out about Matthew Nicks this year in terms of how much he's prepared to release the shackles. Because if he doesn't, and if we keep seeing things like playing Geordie at quarterback all year, then to me, that says to me that ultimately Matthew Nicks does not have 100% faith in his squad.
Well, maybe he doesn't play.
Well, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm saying that would be an indicator to me. If he's not prepared to let him run and play aggressive football and take the game to the opposition, there's a reason for that. And I don't think it's philosophy, because GWS didn't play like that. Matthew Nicks, the teams that Matthew Nicks played in didn't play like that.
Sydney, he played Sydney.
Yeah, but he coached at GWS. Like, at Sydney, they didn't play like that. At GWS, when he was assistant coach there, they didn't play like that.
No, he's always said that what he's trying to copy more is the Sydney model of playing.
The Sydney model wasn't a defensive model. It was a hard model because they needed to be hard because it was a small ground that they were playing on, very enclosed, lots of congestion and all the rest of it. But it wasn't a defensive model that they played. It was an aggressive model that they played.
Yep, always has been.
So, and this is what I'm saying. If Nick's coaches a conservative game plan, that's not a philosophical thing. That's not Matthew's philosophy, I don't think. That's an indicator of the amount of faith that he has in the squad. Well,
time will tell, Dean. We'll know a little bit more after the trial matches, but then when the games start, we'll find out. And it'll be, it's an interesting thing. It's his 4th year, and certainly don't expect a premiership, and that would be stupid to expect that. But, after 4 years, you do expect improvement. Improvement. And so there's got to be improvement. And as we've said, 10's the cut-off point, but you're hoping for more than that.
I'm optimistic that we can sneak into the bottom half of the 8. It'll depend on, its consistency, I think, and our ability to beat some of the big top teams. But as we discussed last week, Macca, our Achilles heel wasn't the top teams by and large over the last couple of seasons. It's actually been games that we're more expected to win. So, if we can put our best foot forward against teams around us on the ladder or below us on the ladder, then we'll probably jag 1 or 2 wins against top 8 sides because we seem to have the ability to do that. And generally speaking, those games that we did win against higher teams, it was because we played a much more free-flowing, almost at times kamikaze game of football.
Just can I just throw one real loop at you? Totally
Go
nothing
on.
to do with the Crows.
Hmm.
What did you think, Ginnivan? Do you think that he got off very, very light?
Well, I was going to flick on to other stuff, so thanks for that, because it's a good segue. Gentlemen, um, all I'll say is if that was Tex Walker, what do you reckon would have happened?
8 matches, 6 matches, or something like that.
Hard labour, I would have thought. He would
Maybe
have done
death.
time in bloody Port Pirie, I reckon.
Yeah, I
There,
can't believe it.
there are two blokes that are being kissed on the backside by a fairy, and one is Ginnivan, and the other one is the lad from North Melbourne,
Taron Thomas.
Taron Thomas. Like, compared to the furor and the uproar that has happened every time an Adelaide Crow has blown his nose without a tissue or forgotten to wear a mask in public, I can't believe the lack of saber rattling around those two circumstances.
I know it's incredible, and I think the AFL is just as guilty as the media of attacking Adelaide.
It's almost too difficult to ignore now, Macca. It is almost too difficult to ignore the protective nature of the Melbourne media towards Victorian players and their ferocious attack on anything that happens outside of the border, particularly in South Australia and particularly with the Adelaide Crows.
Yep. And that,
It,
and why they pick on Adelaide, of course, is because Adelaide's got their own media department.
well, I think that's some of it, but I don't think it's all of it. You know, imagine going through your life having such an inferiority complex that you had to continue to snipe and attack another city just to prove to yourself your own superiority. That's what happens in Victoria. Victorians have the biggest inferiority complex. If it's not South Australia they're whinging about, it's New South Wales they're whinging about. They've got they're the best at this and they're the greatest at that and they're the sporting hub of the universe and they're the cultural capital of the world and they're the world's greatest living city and all that sort of bullshit. It's a stinky hellhole, right? It's a mess of a place, and the people that live in Melbourne know it deep down, and so all they have to do continually to boost themselves up is to rag on other states.
Yep. But, PJ Crow says that the AFL is a corrupt corporation. Accept it. And look, he is right, because of the fact that they are prepared to differentiate in the way they treat players as well. I mean, we know what the Victorian media is like, vicious towards Adelaide, vicious. But the AFL, they actually give the Victorian teams half, a quarter, a tenth of the penalty that an Adelaide team would get.
Well, you only need to read the book that what was his name? That Boys Club book that was put out. PJ will know the author's name. I've forgotten it. To understand how things work in the AFL and in Victoria in general. Mick Warner, thank you, PJ. I would say everyone should read that book. It's not sensationalised. It deals with some old stuff, but it also deals with things, to do with Andrew Demetrio and subsequently Gil McLachlan. I would, if you really want to understand how the AFL work, Macca, just read the book.
Yeah, well, you mentioned Dimitri. That business, who I remember the bloody player now, that we lost 2 years of draft pick for because there was a little side contract and we'd take a second round draft pick for him when we would clear him.
Tippett.
Price. If that had been a Victorian side, no way would they lost 2 years of like first and second round draft pick.
We got punished more heavily than Essendon did, Mac.
Unbelievable.
In terms of sanctions, we got punished heavier than Essendon did for drug sanctions, for drug transfers. transgressions. You know, the only team that has been hit harder than us has been Carlton, and I can tell you why Carlton got hit so bad, because they all hated Jack Elliott.
Yeah, but even then we got the same penalty as Carlton.
No. They got worse than us. They got massive fines as well. They got decimated, Carlton. But it was because of John Elliott. John Elliott was at war with the AFL, and they didn't like him, and they Mike Fitzpatrick, I think, was one from memory, and they smashed him. But look, we don't have to go into the politics of it all. I would say anyone that really wants to understand how the AFL operates, and understand the capacity for the AFL to manipulate situations, and how the AFL is so outcome focused, just read Mike Warner's book. Right, we are seeing it play out in terms of the Hawthorn situation. We've seen it play out in the past, and now we're seeing it play out with Ginnivan. And yet, if the Adelaide Crows got on a camp and do some wrong stuff, sure, which was no good, we're still talking about it 6 years bloody later.
It'll be spoken about forever, Pete.
You know, the infamous camp. They stuffed up. There's been other infamous camps that never get spoken about. What about Melbourne's camp that the Melbourne players revolted against Simon Goodwin and said, we're not doing this? No one says a word about that.
No. So here we got Ginnivan in a bloody toilet, snorting away, and somebody films him. And it's a rather strange situation. The Channel 7, he runs around selling it to the highest bidder. Channel 7 get it, and they talk to the AFL. They talk to Collingwood, and at the very moment that Channel 7 starts interviewing Ginnivan, AFL and Collingwood release a statement at precisely exactly the same time.
Yeah. Coincidence?
No, not coincidence.
It's a complete and utter coincidence, Mackie. You know that, surely.
Yeah. If it would have been Adelaide Pad, that would come out in different stages, splashing and belting and so on. But we've got this choreographed thing that he repents on TV and all over.
Yeah. And look, Ginnivan's biggest crime was that he got caught, because let's not be naive enough to think that cocaine use in particular in the AFL circles isn't rampant.
The old nose is.
If we thought that, we would just be naive.
True.
So Ginnivan just got caught.
Yeah, well, that's true. But I'm just thinking that if it's a South Australian boy, you wait and see what happens.
Yeah. I noticed also with the Hawthorn investigators that Egan, the guy that came up with the initial review that was leaked to the ABC, is now up on fraud charges. He was arrested last week, I think, on fraud charges to do with the community association that he was involved with at the time. So that's a nice little distraction away and a little ding in the credibility of that report too, isn't it?
Oh, he was defrauding money, wasn't he?
I think so. Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. And that whole situation too is an absolute joke, because when was that first reported thing? September?
What, the Hawthorn thing?
Yeah, September?
Yeah, it was during finals, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was supposed to be they were going to investigate it within 2 weeks, they said.
Yep. You know as well as I do what happens when you drag things out. It loses all its momentum. Yeah,
well, and to the point now where the people who were going to testify, who made the claims in the first place, so they're not going to testify. Yep. So what's going to happen? It's going to fade away into the merry distance.
Yeah. And, maybe it was a storm in the teacup too, Mac. We'll never know. We'll never know whether that was overblown. The simple fact that Alistair Clarkson and Chris Fagan were allowed to go back and go back to work. Told us everything you needed to know about how seriously the AFL were taking that. But we'll never know. And it's a shame, because if the allegations are true, then they were horrific. But we'll never know whether they were the result of, some partners that were disenfranchised, like Rioli's partner and forget the other lad's name. Partners were disenfranchised and were exaggerating things, or whether they misheard things or whatever. We'll never know, Macca, because the whole thing's just been blown away.
I don't think there ever will be a resolution thing.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. The wind's gone out of those sails. So, there's a lot of that stuff that goes on, Mac. Like I said, read that book. It'll tell you everything you need to know about the match. Let's have a look at Andrew Demetrio. For whatever reason, Macca, when he applied to be on the Crown Casino board, he was denied access to that board because he failed to meet the fit and proper person test. So that's a person who used to run the AFL. Make of that what you will. I'm not making any allegations, far be it, because Andrew doesn't mind a bit of a lawsuit. But there's the facts. He used to run the AFL and he wasn't allowed to be on the board of the Crown. So, I don't know. You do the maths.
I say nothing.
Well, and he was in charge of the AFL for a long period of time, brokered a lot of deals, manipulated a lot of outcomes, and to his credit, some good, some bad. Without Demetrio, we wouldn't be playing at Adelaide Oval, most likely. But the manner in which that occurred was certainly not above board in many respects, and there's a lot of other things that occurred during his time at the AFL that make you wonder.
No doubt about that.
So, anyway, I don't know how we got onto this subject, but gentlemen probably got off pretty lightly, I think.
I think so.
Yep. Look, that's just about it, Mac, unless you've thought about something else that you want to talk about. No one seems to want to talk in the chat. We've sort of drifted away from Crow's chat, and we've hit our 1 hour 37 minutes, so we're bang on our normal 90 minutes. What do you reckon, mate? Got anything else you want to add before we bugger off?
No, I think that's about as good a place to finish as any. We'll have a lot more to talk about next week.
Yeah, be a little bit more to talk about next week. Don't forget, you can catch us on socials at Twitter and on Facebook and on YouTube. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't yet, please like and subscribe us. It does help us. We're trying to push up our subs so that we can do a bit more stuff on the YouTube side of things. Don't forget all our comps on Discord. We'll have more to say about that next week, obviously. In the meantime, thanks to everyone who joined us tonight, and thanks to everyone who listens to us on demand. Macca, thanks for your time again.
Pleasure.
And Mrs. Macca, I hope you get better soon. In the meantime, stay safe, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Yep. Ciao for now.